Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them, and I love sharing them with you. Feel free to follow me on social media if you would like. Links are in the description below. I've also posted a link to the Marvel fan set that I have plot synopsis and character bios for this issue. Before we get going here, I would like to just point out the dry brush being applied here by Dan Green. Rest in peace, my man. I love me some dry brush, and when I see it, I like to point it out because I'm a huge fan. We're continuing our run of the Chris Claremont universe, and we're looking at the Uncanny X-Men 232 from 1988. And we are going to just look at this issue, but we are starting the best Brood story ever. If you remember from when I covered the Brood the first time, I thought they were the dumbest aliens ever. Love the screen tones being applied here. Dan Green, man, rest in peace. Anyway, these Chris Claremont really does a really good job this time around with them, and I'm sure it's just that the Brood just seemed so the way that they're insectoids kind of things, so they look like insects, and I know it's Marvel's way of like doing aliens, but it just didn't really work. And I'm really glad Marc Silvestri does them in a much more menacing way than the way Dave Cockrum did them. So really cool here. Just looks so badass. So all right, the cover definitely grabs your attention. So all right, and so we're going to go all the way back to X-Men 217. X-Men 216, 217, and 218. All right, so these things happen here. So while Wolverine and Storm were dealing with the old soldiers, the Crimson Dynamo, Stonewall, and then not pictured here, Super Saber. The rest of the X-Men, Psylocke, Dazzler, Rogue, and Longshot were dealing with the Juggernaut up in Scotland. And at the same time, in Paris, New Mexico, Havoc, who's Alex Summers, he's the brother of Cyclops, and his girlfriend, Lorna Dane, who is Polaris. And I think she's been retconned as the daughter of Magneto. I say Magneto, not Magneto. I love this, not so long ago. So at the same time that these were happening, there are these campers here in the Rio Diablo Mountains near New Mexico here. You can see this VW van. I love them. I want one. I've driven them, and I really need to find one. And so we get our title, Earthfall, and we see this meteor coming in there. And we get our credits here. Chris Claremont, writer. Marc Silvestri, penciler. Dan Green, rest in peace, is the inker. And then the same team, Glynis Oliver, used to be Glynis Wayne, is the colorist. And Tom Rozakowski is the letterer. Now, here we see Anna Senti and Bob Harras as the editor. So Bob Harras, yes, the Bob Harras that became editor-in-chief at both Marvel and DC, was her assistant editor. Now he is editing as by himself X Factor, and he is eventually going to be folded or get the entire X line under his command. And then Tom DeFalco has replaced Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief. So, but one more thing about Bob Harras. He's the one that basically drove Chris Claremont out to make way for Jim Lee and Louise Simonson out to make way on New Mutants to make way for Rob Liefeld. And it shows history says that he was both right and wrong because, of course, Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee ended up leaving Marvel in a hole. It kind of convoluted the X-Men, whereas they had the steady hand of Chris Claremont. The X-Men just sort of started becoming a lot different, at least than the characters I grew up with, which is fine. But nowadays, so when you look at the X-Men in the 2020s, with what John Hickman did in the Krakoa era, they are way different than anything done in the past, which is a little bit of a, I don't know, uh, I feel a sense of loss in a way because these were characters that were not just the hottest characters in comic books; they were the flagship. And now I don't know if other than Wolverine anybody cares about the X-Men, and that is makes the world a little bit sadder. Despite the fact that there's still X-Force out there, Uncanny X-Men. There's another X-Men book. Wolverine still has a book. Deadpool has a book, but nobody buys them. So I don't know. Anyway, so the camper's looking at the meteor and it crashes there, and of course this lady here is wants to go investigate. And so he's a paramedic and he's putting on his paramedic jacket because, hey, well, the first thing you do is make sure you put your it's a way for us to know that he is a paramedic. And of course she's shouting order and he's like, you shouldn't go over there. And he's like, crazy woman never listens to anyone. Always has to go on her own way no matter what. And so they're coming here and they see a shark. Now, in 1988, I was 14 years old. And there was no internet. The back issues that I had were very limited. I had no idea about who the Brood were. And when I saw the shark, I was so confused. So confused because I had no idea what the hell. I was like, how is there a shark? I had no idea that the Brood used these sharks for flying. I have a playlist. Feel free to check out all. I have everything all the way from Giant Size X-Men #1 or I should say Classic X-Men #1 all the way to current. And so we are here, but back then I was like, what the hell? What is this? We had, like I said, we had no internet. They really weren't doing collections. Trade paperbacks wasn't really a thing, even in 1988. Now, they eventually do start becoming a thing, but it isn't. I think it's when Joe Quesada takes over as the editor-in-chief that they really ramp up the collections. There were some collections out there, like the Asgardian saga was collected, the Dark Phoenix saga was collected, but there really wasn't too much. When I read the Dark Phoenix saga for the first time, it was in a trade paperback that they had released, but it didn't have any of the covers. So there was a cover with Bill Sienkiewicz, and that's how I discovered it, but none of the actual each issue covers were in there. It was just the story. So I remember when I first saw the covers as they came out in Classic X-Men that I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I was just discovering the X-Men through Classic X-Men at the same time as reading the stuff. So all the stuff between Classic X-Men and the new stuff that was coming back then was really foreign to me. I was in 8th grade going into 9th grade when this came out because these came out in the summer. So I was heading to high school. So when I read these, I was just so confused. I had no idea what a flying shark. I was like, huh, this is weird. So Yeah, one of these things now that makes it easy for people to understand. So the brood use these sharks to fly. So I caught you up. Like I said, go check out my playlist. A ton of videos in there. I've got the New Mutants, I've got X Factor, I've got X-Men, and I have one playlist that puts them all together in reading order. It's really nice. And Wolverine's in there too. All right. So they go looking at this, and suddenly this shark, she keeps poking it, and this guy's like, "Quit poking it." And of course, he's like, she's like, "It's dead," and he's like, "Why taking the chance?" He's like, "What's the point of living otherwise?" And of course, she's about to get eaten here. Absolutely awesome. He calls out, and I like the chomp here and the blood being coming through. That is awesome, hitting him in the face there. And he trips and falls through the brood. Now, as I mentioned before, I had no idea what the brood were. I was so confused seeing this. I didn't really realize what I was looking at when I was going through this. And then the brood are attacking. She fell. She thinks her ankle's broken, and this is just awesome. Look at this. Look at this. This is just awesome here. And oh my god, just the way Marc Silvestri was really becoming hot. I mean, he was really good, but this is the stretch where Marc Silvestri really starts becoming the Marc Silvestri that we all know and love. And look at this. Oh my goodness. I wonder if this is where Todd McFarlane got his Venom going. So she's like, "Help me," and he's like, "Screw that, I'm leaving." And so, of course, then we resume with, if you remember in X-Men 218, that Polaris and Havoc were returning, and they run into this and they go down. So, um, this has been left unresolved since X-Men 218, and we're now in uh, um, sorry, I was trying to think of something uh else that I had a thought and it just kind of blew, so I got that's why you heard all those anyway, we're in 232, and we finally are getting resolution as to what had happened during that time. And so here he is in the past. Now we are in the present, and we are in Denver, Colorado. He is still a paramedic, and this is important. This is going to show up of an at least there's going to be another ad for this, but this is going to become important to the story in the next few issues. So Reverend William Conover, Glory Day Ministries. So very important. So we look at the billboard, so I'm just going to point it out. This will become important. Now, I've been to Denver, and I've been there a few times. And yes, you can see the mountains from Denver, but Denver is not right next to the mountains. So the mountains are probably looks half or even one third of the way down for this. So Marc Silvestri really put Denver right next to the Rocky Mountains. And although they're very close to it, they're at least 30 miles away, 30 40 miles away. So you don't see them quite as big. Here it looks like the city's right in the valley, and it's actually nowhere nowhere near as majestic looking from there as they are in this. But hey, that's what we kayfabe for. So there was a fire because a guy here who's a mutant started a fire. His powers must have come through, and he's breathing fire through his mouth, and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm dying." And he's like, "It looks like you're getting a heart attack." He's like, "No, I'm too young. It isn't fair. I don't want to die." And suddenly you can see the hand of the brood or whatever coming through, and he says, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll live forever. And wow, that is cool. So instead of the chest puncher, the way that aliens go, they go through and inject you. So all right, now we are in the Australian outback. Gateway teleports Madeline Pryor back, and you see that she has some stuff, and she says she'd rather fly than get teleported. She thanks him for the trip, but of course, Gateway doesn't talk, doesn't do anything, and she says, I might as well, or thinks here, I might as well be talking to this hill. I could be stark naked, and that old man wouldn't bat an eye. And so, she comes through, and everyone is gone. She was in Sydney here and calling for everybody, and no answer. And so she drops the stuff that she bought, and she's like, new hairstyle, new outfit, and nobody to tell me around how absolutely great I look. The story of my life, as she sighs here. So now for sighing, it's HH. It's instead of the word. So they'd go sigh. So you'd go, but now it's HH. And so they leave him a message that they went on a mission, and then she thinks about, well, what if the mission doesn't go well? Then she thinks that they should have. Well, we get some introspection, like about the stuff that's happened before here, but that they should have like a logo, and so she creates a star because Dazzler has one, and Havoc, or not Havoc, Longshot has one, and she thinks sheriffs and stars mean law and order. And I'm like, what about the freaking X? But hey, that's all right. And so she gets an 8-sided star because, of course, there's 8 X-Men at this moment. And so as she's watching TV, she sees her husband and Jean Grey. And she now realizes that that's why he left her and her son. And it's kind of funny because if you read X Factor and you look at my videos, you see that Jean Grey started blaming Maddie for the reason Scott left, and that's not true at all. Kind of a little bit of a retconning going by Louis Simonson, but Chris Claremont's keeping it real here. And of course, she's so upset. Punches the TV. Now that's a big TV, and they were made. These aren't like these new TVs. It's really hard to punch and break a TV with the glass that they were made out of. But either way, you can see the skabam here, and she is out. So we are back in Denver. A little bit of nighttime, and you see that the fog is starting to go, and you see that the coloring has changed a little bit here. More cool colors. A couple is kissing here. It's Dazzler and Longshot. They're just out there, and so, but he doesn't know that, and so he opens the door, and he's like, "I'm not gonna cook. I just want to have pizza," and it comes through and drops his stuff. He's like, "Holy cow!" And we see Psylocke's new costume. So this is now the first, and this is what she's gonna wear from now until she becomes that ninja. So she'll just have this for the rest of the time. Colossus slams the door, surprises this guy, but suddenly punches him, lifts him, and throws him and toward Psylocke. And then she goes through. Now she's wearing an armor. That's gonna be a new thing with her costume here. He jumps out, and he doesn't even know how he's doing all this. And so even rips the door out. Havoc blasts him. I always say that I admire how all these artists always put his symbol on the side regardless. So here come Longshot and Dazzler. He throws the door, and again he's confused as to what the heck, how the heck is this? He throws the door so hard it goes through a uh, what are these things? A power pole or a post or something like that. Anyway, so you can see the power lines snap here, and of course Rogue gets it to make sure that this doesn't cause anything and grabs the lines and wraps them around. Um, Colossus feels embarrassed because the guy just threw him away, and she says, "Man, I was scanning his mind. I had no idea he even had any powers." And so, and then that's where they make the new costume with the suit of armor, and Longshot says, "Could he be a mutant?" And of course, Wolverine is like, "Nope, that's not true." Everybody's like, real quick with Storm's hair, she still has the mohawk, only now her hair is growing from the mohawk out. So that's why we have, that's why Marc Silvestri kind of draws her like this, because she still technically has the mohawk. And so Wolverine's like, he's been infected. They had his set, so that's how they are able to get him. They ask, "Are you certain?" And he's like, "I'm very certain." So they're like, he's Brood. It's just that the human part doesn't know it. So they are going to go look, and so Wolverine says, "Gonna go look for him." He says, "I'll keep my mind out. Have Psylocke link with him." So the guy's running again. This ministry thing that's coming, and he's calling for a taxi, but the taxi doesn't stop. It's off duty. He gets a bus here. He doesn't stop. Goes through, but someone's waiting for him. You can tell here, and that is Rogue. And this guy's like, nope. A little bit of dry brush being employed here, and she's like, "What the hell? How is he so fast and strong?" And so you can see that the hand appears again. But here comes Wolverine to the rescue. Calls him Sleazoid. That's what he called them back in the day. So awesome. He throws him in there. This guy's like, "What the hell?" He ends up crashing here, and of course it's the 80s still, so everything explodes. And so he runs into a wall here, and Wolverine is there, end of the line, and takes out his claws. I love this snicked. And he says, "You got any beliefs? Now's the time to make peace with them." And the Rogue calls out for him and goes, "Where's the driver?" And then sees him that he's away, not even a scratch. And so she's all shipped to shred. And she says here to Wolverine, "Leave the fella be, partner, until Psylocke's done." And then the guy says, "Then what? Do you really need for us to say, Mr. Palmer?" Then the police arrive here, and he takes out the guns here. He's happy that they're here. Wolverine goes and attacks them, and then pops his claws and slashes this woman. Of course, she's like, yells at him, goes, "Wolverine, you crazy son of a, you just killed a cop." And Wolverine is like, "I know what I did, girl. Let me go so I can finish what I started." He goes, "No way." And he says, "You're making a mistake. Not from where I stand. Storm, X-Men, help me. Wolvie's gone nuts," says Rogue. And Psylocke says, "No, he hasn't. Those he attacked, they aren't police officers." And Wolverine says, "They're Brood." And we end here. They aren't the only one, X-Men. We're all Brood here. And soon, old enemies, very soon, you will be too. And they have them surrounded. So, like I said, this was my first exposure to the Brood. I had no idea what they were, what this is, and Marc Silvestri And I think Chris Claremont maybe even realized that they needed to be a little bit more humanoid to be a little bit more threatening next year, Dawn of Blood. So X-Men 232 by Chris Claremont with Marc Silvestri and Dan Green. Like and subscribe. We got 2 more parts of this Brood Saga here. I do thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.